Okay. Very good afternoon, everyone. This is our session fourth on 11th of August. Uh, Today, we will be discussing, we'll be completing the pre-contractual negotiations portion, and we'll be moving to like parties in the contract. Before doing that, let me just remind everyone that if you had noticed in your class as in teams like for international contracts, uh, there in the file section I have uploaded in class material the PPT for the last week, and also I have uploaded a book. So if you let me just share the screen, maybe I can show it to you. Okay, so I guess you can see Teams now. So you go to Teams. Abhijit, why do you want control to my screen? Okay. So guys, yeah. So when you go to the file section, you'll be going to the class material, and then you see this book. So you open this link, and this is your international contracts book. It will be having most of the theoretical part, but for example, the principles part and the treaty and the customs, it won't be there. So it's a really good book. It's I think 200 pages, uh, and it will be covering, yeah. For example, this will be the introduction to international commerce. Then, what are the issues in the international contracts? Then, the parties to the transactions. Then also, key issues in the sales contract, trade terms and incoterms, which we'll be discussing after we complete the parties to the transaction. Um, and if you see, parties to the transaction is in three parts. Like this is the part one. Then you can see chapter 7 as part 2, and then you can see part 3 as chapter 9. So what is the difference is that the part 1 covers before the transaction even begins, so the foundation basis of the transaction, so who are the parties, and what pointers do you want to consider if you, for example, you are a buyer. So what are the points of important points for you, and if you're a seller, what are the points of contravention for you. So those are the part one in the transaction. Part two is more between the transaction, like for example, it will be more like an obligatory part of the transaction, like the main part of the transaction, like what are the points you have to consider in the within the transaction, because the part one talks about the beginning, part two talks about the then part three is after the transaction is over. So this will be in three parts. Other than that, we will be also discussing the drafting uh, of the provisions. So this is a very good chapter, and yeah, basically everything is in there. The e-commerce portion will be missing, so we will also find material for e-commerce. So don't worry, we'll get on whenever we cross that bridge. We'll talk about it. So coming back to, let me share the PPT now. The week one. Okay, any questions as of now?
No,
Okay,
sir.
great. Also, Murli sir will be adding your classes on SIS. It has not been done yet. So as soon as your classes are on SIS, I'll be uploading your attendances. Okay. So the grace period which I am giving to you guys is that, for example, I have a class at 4 o'clock. By 4:10, whosoever is entering, I'm going to give them the attendance. But after 4:10, if you're entering into the class, it has to be on. It will be very difficult for me to give you the attendance. Okay. So please make sure that you are, at least you come join the class by four, yeah, like 4 or 5, even if you are running late. I appreciate if you join the class at 3:55, because that's the time I target to join the class on my side. So yeah, I will also add in the introduction. I think it was not added here. So let me just add it. The 12 point create terms and Incoterms. Okay. So guys, we did the meaning and definition. We did principles of the international contract. We just did the introduction of Lex Mercatoria. We were on. We also discussed the pre-contractual statements. Now today will be completing that, and we'll be coming to the parties to the transaction. So when I'm taking parties to the transaction, I think I'll be taking all the 3 chapters together. So within this week, I think we'll be mostly completing the clauses, the parties to the transactions, and the language part, the importance of language and culture, and limitations of drafting international contracts. And then for next week, we'll be keeping what are the hardships faced by the international contract. It's a very small topic. Then did we do the validity of the contract? I think no. No. Okay. So I think by next week we'll be able to complete the whole unit 1. Okay. So yeah. So coming to the yep. I think we discussed until this point what were pre-contractual negotiations and what are the reasons. So basically, when I told you the reason is to form a strategic contract, because you want to be very clear at the beginning, and there has to be no delinquencies between both the parties. You have to see the favoritism whosoever we are representing. So for example, if you're representing party A in the contract, as a lawyer to that party, you will be more focusing on what's favorable for your party, and you, for example, then it will be vice versa. So basically, to get the favorism, to get a favorism deal, you need to focus on what's important for your client. Again, when I told you, either it can be done by one party or it can also be done by both the parties. It depends on the complexity of the transaction, and how big is the transaction. Like the more bigger, like for example, if it's like a boilerplate contract, so if it involves like a very simple transaction. Mainly they don't ever, I think, even like meet, right? So they will be doing the contract on email or maybe through Skype. So basically that is the only thing. But if there's a transaction is very complex, the parties will be visiting the both the offices, and there will be like weeks of dealings between both the parties, and there will be the contract will be going from one place to another between both the parties, and they will be making sure that whatever they want, they can come to the one basic term. So it is very important. The fourth point, which I told you, was like to build the trust, to make that capability possible between both the parties, because it is very important. And why do you build the trust? To have a high performance contract. So basically, there are so many instances when the party is dealing for a decade. For example, there are like forefathers are dealing with the company since like maybe 50 years. So basically, in those type of cases, there is just a formality of entering to the contract. But for example, if the parties are fairly new to each other, they would want to have that trust element into both the pockets, because they want to make sure that there will be 100% performance to the contract, because performance is the end result, because you want to make sure that the contract is performed between both the parties. So is the contract performed when there are the contract is in good faith, the negotiations have been done completely, and they are both are clear and prospect of what the one party wants. So the lastly on the D point, I can say to avoid any kind of dispute resolution. So in those kinds of cases, it is already always important to have a pre-contractual negotiation. So um, so guys, there are two forms of pre-contractual negotiations. One is the positive and one is the negative. So before I do that, I can explain. It is self-explanatory, but doctrine of culpe in contrahendo is the duty to negotiate in the good faith. So you will be hearing this term, this doctrine many a times, in before you start drafting the contract, because this is the doctrine that illustrates that both the parties are to negotiate in good faith. So no bad blood should be there between both the parties, and there should not be any secret agenda behind entering into those kinds of contract. So again, there are two types of strategic posturing, which is one is the negative and one is the positive. uh, so the negative one does not aim in concluding the contract, which is why we'll be discussing this in next slide. While the second type, which is the positive, it aims in concluding the contract. It's even when you read the term, when you read negative strategizing of contract posturing, you see that maybe something is fishy there. So and when you hear positive, you see that the parties are in the best of their contacts, and they want to conclude the contract on the terms which are agreeable by both the party. Okay. Coming. Okay. So the first kind, which is the negative strategic posturing, it relates to this. It's like a basic scenario, where the one of the party will be having a secret agenda. They don't want to go anywhere, but they just want to revolve around the party. They want to revolve around the negotiations to obtain the information from the other party. For example, like trade secrets, or use some basic pointers, or entering into the negotiation to influence the third party to enter into the negotiation with the party taking to as a negative posture, or to enter the negotiation for deferring the opportunity uh, by creating some environment where you will be showing that you are very interested into entering into the contract, but yeah, in back of the mind, that you are definitely not interested in entering into the contract with the party because you have some other intent. So any points on negative strategic posturing? Because again, in summary, if I can tell you, it is only for procuring information from the other party, or getting to know the confidential information related to the company, and in order to form that contract. Just 1 second. Okay, so very sorry for that. So any points on negative strategic posturing of the contract, pre-contractual negotiations?
So,
Yeah.
in the previous class, you just spoke about collaborative negotiation. If you could just repeat that again.
Collaborating is the third point, I think, if I'm not wrong. This one,
It's the
right?
fourth.
Yes,
Collaborative.
sir.
Yeah. So, did I already discuss the negative and the positive?
Actually, yes, a little bit of it, like a summary kind of thing.
Okay. So, yeah, let me just complete the positive and then I'll come to the collaborative. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Great. Okay. So,
So, sir, can you please switch on to the negative strategic posturing slide? Yeah.
any question in particular? And I again made some edits to this particular slide. So I'm going to take down the previous version, which is already on the Teams, and I'll be re-uploading this so that it has the complete information. But we'll be done with this then. I won't be touching the whole PPT afterwards. Yeah, one other reason which I can feel, why the party enters in such kinds of arrangement is because, for example, this party, there's a party A and B are trying to enter into a contract, and party B is totally new to that geography. Okay, they are definitely new to that territory. So what will happen? The party B will try to, will try to show that they want to enter into a contract just so that they can get into the territory of that particular zone and they can get to know the market. Because the market is definitely one important element. Even like for example, before you try to enter into the contract, because you would definitely want to know the market. And how do you get to know the market perfectly is through the client base of the other party. So if you try to enter into the negotiations with the other party, and you would definitely get some information about what kind of market is the party in right now, and what kind of customer base does the party have. So basically that is very important point. So in summary, I can obtain 3 points from here. Number one, to get to know the territory of the market. Number two, to get to procure information from the other party, the confidential information from the other party. And number three, to have some advance interests from the other party in pretext of the negotiations. I think we are more than clear on this slide. Okay. So guys, I think someone unmuted. Okay, great. So guys, positive strategic posturing is the negotiation of a contract on the most favorable terms possible for either parties. So what will happen here is for every party there are benchmark terms. So basically they have their own set of strategies, and they have their own sets of terms which they want to which are definitely in their favor. So what's going to happen in positive strategic posturing is that there won't be any open platform, but as exchange for exchange of information. But they will be definitely because what will happen, they will be withholding some important information. Okay. because they definitely that is the one difference between positive and negative. Negative में क्या होता है that they definitely they share ton of information between each other, but positive strategy is in the meaning that they will be withholding important information. They will be going with good conduct, and basically with the principle that they definitely want to enter into a contract. Okay, they will be generally characterized by like and but having opportunist behavior does not mean that you will be demeaning some other party. It includes, like, for example, withholding information and utilizing superior knowledge of the law. And if you are utilizing those points, that is definitely not the like a bad part. So utilizing the knowledge which is already there to favor your own party does not mean that you are deceiving the other party. Are you getting my point? So this is all. It's like being in the game, playing by the rules, playing by the principles, and getting your work done. So, and to have the full respect towards each other. Uh, Collaborative is, guys, it's basically a different, like a style of negotiation where both the parties will be coming up with the mutual interest. They will be collaborating together, to see, and they will be sharing some equitable information, cost, and for the pretext of the preserving the deal between both the parties. So this is, definitely what will happen if you enter into such kind of posturing, is that you rule out disputes between both the parties, because you have collaborated at first, you have drafted it together, and you have negotiated it together, and to advance the interest of the mutual interest of the both the parties. So future disputes between both the party. And what will happen that the performance of the contract, the performance of the parties and the performance of the contract will incentivize, and it will be like a 100% productive rate. Are you getting my point? So this was, first we discussed negative, then we discussed the positive, and then we discussed the collaborative. Any questions so far?
Excuse me, sir. Could you
Yeah.
please just differentiate between the positive strategic posturing and the collaborative one once?
So positive one is they definitely not work together in whole front. They will be definitely working in interest of their own party, whereas if you see the collaborative, they work it out together because they have their mutual interest aligned. But in the positive strategic posturing, there's nothing as of mutual interest, or something. They are definitely concerned about their own party, because they want to get their preferred terms into the agreement. uh, and there's no free flow of information, whereas what second point is, there's no free flow of information in the positive strategic posturing. Whereas in collaborative strategic posturing, as they are mutual interest aligned, they definitely share a good amount of knowledge between both the parties. Then I can come. It includes, basically, for example, misrepresenting the positions of the party, or example, withholding information and utilizing superior knowledge of law in ambit of getting the contract done, which is favoring their own party. Whereas collaborative mein, they are already working together, so they don't have to worry about those points. Because, and the other advantage is that in collaborative, as they work together, there is less likely to be any future dispute, and there is full performance of the contract, whereas there is nothing in the positive strategic posturing. So there are no mutual interest aligned, but definitely they have one thing in both the as common point, that they want 100% performance of the contract. So they are not, like for example, negative में क्या होता है, that they just move around the party to know the information. Whereas in positive, what happens, they definitely move around the party, but they not in pretext of knowing the information. They whereas they withhold the information, but they want to definitely entertain into the contract.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Any more questions on all these 3 points?
Sir, this is Shivani from other side.
Yeah.
Sir, in positive strategic posturing, can you explain it with an example?
Example which I can come up with, like negative mein to, for example, let me give you example for all the 3 types of posturing. For example, there is a party A which deals into automobile industry. Okay. And they belong to Japan. Now there is this party B which is into e-commerce. Okay. And they are now, both the industries are not related at all. Okay. So what happens into the negative strategic posturing is that party B will try to, and party B want to expand their vision. Okay. And they want to expand their areas of sectors in which they deal. So they have some, they want to, for example, they want to develop a company which will be dealing with automobile industry. So they will be entering in pretext to, in some kinds of arrangement with the party A, just to know the market of the party A, in what kind of dealings do they deal with, and what kinds of transactions, what kind of customer base do they have. Whereas in positive strategic posturing is that party A and party B, both, they know the intent. Okay. For example, one is dealing in textile industry, one is dealing in e-commerce. Okay. And then they both are interrelated, right? So textile is interrelated to e-commerce because going further, they will be, whatever designs they will be developing, they will be selling out to the companies which will be dealing through e-commerce. So they have some aligned businesses together, but in the context of handling the contract with a positive point of view. So they will be applying positive strategy. If you read the name, what a positive strategic posturing means, positive strategy to procure the contract. Negative strategic posturing means negative strategies to get the contract. With this, what will happen, both the parties will be mutually not working together, but they will be working as a mutual interest of their benefit of their own parties. Are you getting my point? So party A and party B will be working individually on their with the pretext of their own parties. They won't be sharing any information between both the parties. They will be utilizing the information which is already in the market. For example, Terita device. So party A and party B both, as one is in textile industry, one is in e-commerce. So, party A will try to enter into a contract where they will try to get some place, get some space where tax bracket is very low, right? For example, you see there are some corridors like in India, export manufacturing corridors where the tax rates are very low. Why those tax rates are very low? Because the states, they want to charge, they want to get more business for themselves, so that they charge very low tax rates to those companies. So that information is already in the market. So they will be utilizing that information in procuring those bases. Whereas what happens in the collaborative, that both the parties, party A and B, they are already working together to preserve a deal. Any confusions?
So thank you.
Okay. Okay, so guys, this is one of the case, the first cases which we'll be dealing. I did try to, summarize it in a very simple language. What was the base? This is called the Bernina case. The full name of the case is Bernina Distributors versus Bernina Sewing Machines. So what happened? It was just a basic, case where both the parties entered into a contract, and they kept an open language. Basically, open language. When I mean is that they did not discuss the exchange rate risk in it. So there was a lot of currency fluctuation, and the cost increased, which could not surpass the distributor, and it became an issue. So it was definitely a poorly written open price term agreement contract, which resulted in a monetary loss between both the parties. So the distributor of the sewing machine, they brought the action against the importer for the breach of contract, because they said that now you're not fulfilling your terms and you're breaching the contract. Whereas who was the defendant in this case? The defendant was the machine company, the importer. So the importers said that there was a problem as related to the pricing and the fluctuation of the interest rates. That's why they cannot honor the deal. So coming down to what did the court say? Number one reason the court listed, because there was a subsequent decline of the dollar in relation to the Swiss currency. It resulted to a dramatic increase in the imported cost. So the court cited UCC section 2, subsection 615 of the uh, Uniform Commercial Code, and they said that it is on the pretext of the parties to decide as in terms of the agreement. And going to the other slide, it is depending on the it is based on the pretext of the parties to decide the open term agreement. And if there is a risk of the currency fluctuation, it has to be, number one, it has to be considered between the ambit of the both the parties. But the contract placed, if the contract places a risk of diminishing profit margin due to the currency fluctuation, it definitely cannot be honored. And the court rejected the applicability of the doctrine of impracticability, because if you see that even if you convert the rate, it is on the pretext of the both the party to decide it beforehand. But the court took a view that it has to be done within the time bound exception, and non-performance is not the solution here. There will be a performance of the contract. So please go through this judgment and do it is an IRAC form as an issue, rule, analysis, and conclusion. If I ask you this case, what happened in this case? And you'll be getting all of this here. Any questions?
So you stated some sections or something which was applicable in this case. Could you repeat that?
Yeah. It's section 2. I'll just write it down for you guys. UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, which excuses the party in for the performance of the contract on impracticability basis. I think with this we are over with the week 1 slide. Do you guys need time, or should I move further? I think I'll take it as a yes. And moving further, meaning definition, principles of international contract, then three parties to transactions, and then three contractual statements, parties to transaction. Okay, perfect. Can you see the other slide now? The week two. Can you see the week two ICE?
No, sir.
No? Okay. I think now you would.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
great. So again, guys, parties to the transactions, as I mentioned, we'll be discussing it in three three parts. One which is in the beginning of the transaction, then the other one will be in the middle of the transaction, and then one which will be the after the transactions. And again, you know, moving further, I can tell you one thing. So whatever I'm teaching right now, it's like a very it's a very conclusive viewpoint of the topics. But definitely, if you want to go in details, there is definitely you know, tons of research work on different aspects of the model clauses and model laws. You know, so if you definitely want to go in depth of the, because if you are very interested in working with the law firms who are, you know, who deal with, you know, international clients, you definitely need to have some more knowledge on international contracts law. So everything comes down to the drafting. So when we deal the drafting, you will be knowing the basis and, you know, the basis of distinction. Definitely. But moving towards parties to the transaction before the transactions, I can tell you that as an introductory part, you know, why do we discuss it? Because, you know, we want to know the party. We want to know what is the pretext of having the contract, because we are dealing with we are discussing sales transaction here, right? So how does sales transaction happens is that it happens between two party A and party B. Now party A will be a buyer and party B will be a seller. Now what difference can be there also, that there are multi parties involved, because for example, the buyer and seller are entering into the agreement, and the seller will be selling selling that part, whatever the seller is buying from the buyer, to the third party. Now buyer and the seller, they are entered into an agreement. Now for some reason the buyer cannot provide the commodity to the seller, and the seller, he already entered into an agreement with the third party here. So what will happen if the seller is not getting the commodity from the buyer? The agreement with third party will be also affecting here, right? So in some kind of situation, other interests of the third parties or the individual interests of the parties, they act jointly, and they jointly control the sales contract between the buyer and the seller. Are you getting my point? Any confusion here? I can re-explain this to you. The best example, you know, I have given that if, for example, if a buyer enters into a sale transaction and promises to sell the goods to the third party retailer by certain date. Now what happens that the retailer then arranges to resell those goods to the some other party accordingly. But the goods are delivered 2 months late. So what will happen? The resale of that good will be lost, and the third party recourse will be against the buyer. So now what will happen? Whatever damages will happen in this kind of situation, it might or it might not be protected by the virtue of both the parties together. So it has to be this all has to be discussed before the transactions, that whether this kind of, you know, loss will be incurred by the parties or not. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Great. So, as a quick tip, for example, if you ask, being the owner of the company, you will ask your lawyer for the explanation of the concept. So what will the term be used here is the privity of the contract. Now, guys, what is the privity of the contract here? The privity is the purview of the contract, whether the party is covered into the purview, but within the ambit of that contract or not. So the basic answer will be any person who is directly a party to the contract, whether a third party has a right to enforce the contract in that issue, will be will be left to the attorney in the light of the particular circumstances involved. So the lawyer will definitely say that this is covered by the privity of the contract, and whether that party is related to this transaction or not is to the distinction of the contract which was formed between both the parties. Coming to the buyer's point of view first, the buyer as a consumer, if we just explain in the the literal language, is the person who consumes the goods and the services. Now, what is the return the buyer is getting here is the compensation from the seller, right? Now, it is not important, and it is not prevalent that the buyer may be the person who will be consuming those goods or not. He might be reselling those goods to the other party, right? To the other buyers. So alternatively, the buyer may be the ultimate consumer or not. It has to be on the virtue of the given party. So discussing it as a goal, what is the goal of the buyer here is that the buyer plays the role of a middleman. So number one, he has to understand the market, right? In the market the buyer is going to deal. So the first point is that they have to understand the market. And why do they have to understand the market? Because they will be dealing in goods and services, right? So if they are dealing with the goods and services, they definitely need to have the idea of the market, in which market are they gonna negotiate. Then number two, they have to see the primary factor which will affect will be the supply and the demand change. If for example, if there are many suppliers and many buyers, the position will be weaker of the buyer because he will face so many competitions. But if there are less suppliers and there are more buyers, he will be facing some controversy at that point. But if it's a vice versa position, he'll be at a better position, right? So if there are like less producers and there is like a more buyers, then the buyer will be at the default rate. But if there are like more producers and there are like less buyers, the supply will be at the more rate. So advantage over the market is very important as a goal here. Any questions on this point? Okay. So then if we talk about the safeguard principles here, the buyer safeguards, it talks about the quality and the background check of the party. So as a buyer, one person should definitely take the assurance and protections against the defective and the damaged goods. So in what situation they can do that is that they have to do the background check first. So why do they have to do the background check on the other party? To know the reputation of the other party. If for example, if the party has cheated other clients before, or the party has been banned by the government of that country. Because for example, if you deal domestically, you are dealing at a different. You don't need to worry about many factors. But for example, if you are dealing internationally, you don't have much information. So how can you get the information about the client is is to get a background check done, or to get the proof, or for example goods. For example, you can ask the buyer to give you some sample pieces, right? So the on the pretext of those sample pieces, the contract will be moved further, right? So you can keep it as a evidence also, that for example, if something goes wrong tomorrow, if the quality which was promised to you is not the quality which has been provided, and if the matter goes to the court, you can show those sample pieces to the court, and you can tell that these pieces were given to us, but the quality which we have received is below that product. Then you can also check references. For example, there are some for example, in our business, as a lawyer, we definitely take letter of recommendations from the firms we work with, right? So again, in export and import world also, the word of mouth plays a very important role. So they can definitely take the reference words, and for example, this mutual party you have worked with already, and they know a client who deals with like traditional jewelry. So and this client is prospective buyer is very interested in traditional jewelry. So this middle person, they can recommend the name of this third party, and by that name, that reference will matter a lot for both the parties, so they can get into a fair dealing. So that is the buyer's safeguard if something goes wrong in those situations. Any questions?
No, sir. And it's time, sir.
Is it already? What's the time? Oh, it's 4:52. Okay. Everyone who are in the class, please raise your hands. Okay, fair. Let me just download the attendance. Everyone, you can take your hands down. Okay, any questions at this point?
No, sir.
No. Perfect. Then see you guys tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
sir.
You're welcome, everyone. Take care.